I I believe that we are our own best healers and teachers, and we have this innate ability within ourselves to make change, to grow new neural connections. We can do the job of the psychedelics. And what I see intentionality and intention is empowering our own higher power, our own inner healer, and getting that ball rolling with our own power, to which we can bring plant medicines in, psychedelics in, to support us and enhance us.
Today we get to meet Dana Harvey. We'll get to know Dana as she shares her story in just a moment. But before we dive in, let's let Dana's own words set the tone. We are all complete, lovable, and loving. We all have innate wisdom and power within us to live our lives to our highest potential and fulfillment. But when we can't see that about ourselves, when we feel stuck, when we have become our own roadblocks to true soul fulfillment, then safe and intentional psychedelic microdosing and journeying can be powerful tools to transform our perspectives, unlock our true potential, and flourish. To connect with Dana Harvey, go to flourishacademy.org. You can also find her on Instagram. She and Eric cover rethinking success, understanding feminine and masculine balance, recognizing an individual's personal, unique path to healing, awakening the inner healer via the power of intentionality, approaching sacred medicine as a relationship or practice, interacting with a mushroom as a personality, thoughts about the future of the present psychedelic renaissance, and other topics. You're listening to Psilocybin Says. To support it, subscribe on YouTube and podcasts, stay connected on Instagram and TikTok, and of course, join the conversation in the comments.
Dana Harvey, welcome to Psilocybin Says.
Hey, Eric. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to meet you. You had such a great conversation with Peg. And like I said, there was so much wonderful feedback around that conversation. So I'm looking to see where your stories and your work intersect and just kind of what we can glean from your experience. So just kind of, start us out on how you got into the psychedelic space.
Yeah, thanks. My entry into the psychedelic space, as a person who supports people who are choosing to use psychedelics, kind of came in a roundabout way. It came off the back of a 30 plus odd year career in corporate communications, where I'd worked my way up to C-suite level, working around the world with a specialty in communications for emerging technologies and new industries. So as psychedelics arose or re-arose as basically a new industry, it kind of made sense that I was recruited into that space as Chief Communications Officer and Head of Investor Relations for one of the publicly traded companies. So
okay. Where's the connect though still? I mean, I understand that in tech there's interest in psychedelics for creative exploration and all that, but where does communication between the tech world and the psychedelic world, if that's how I'm understanding?
Yeah, I think what it is my career, my communications career focused on helping businesses and companies that are in the space of new industries, or which is very often new technologies. And psychedelics, in fact, are a technology. They are a technology that helps to expand our consciousness, to heal and to grow. But as it, for over 50 years, this has not been an industry. It hasn't been talked about. It hasn't been in the public sphere. So as we started seeing these psychedelic companies pop up, it was considered a new industry. There's no rules around communications written yet. How do we communicate this stuff? Who do we communicate it to? Are there any restrictions around communication? What is going to, there's bigger communications things here too in this realm of destigmatization and education before we can even get to more corporate communications around it. So that's where they saw my expertise, working in the realm of communications where these rules haven't been written yet. where that made sense for me to come into this emerging industry during the psychedelic renaissance, which was about 5 years ago that I was doing that.
Okay, so in the last 5 years, I'm curious what you're seeing in terms of the destigmatization. How much stigma are you still encountering, if any? You know, I hear from members still pretty regularly that say their psychiatrist is, you know, adamantly opposed to psychedelics. Had someone recently tell me that that this was just kind of a replacement addiction. You know, their therapist told them that psychedelics were, and I was just like, it's baffling to me that misconception is still out there. But I would imagine that in your position, you probably get to experience that firsthand.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I think because we're in this space, Eric, like it's normal conversation for us, and I still get like just kind of backstop sometimes that when I have a conversation and it comes up that way, like, oh, so you mean like you're dealing illegal drugs? Like, okay, no, this is not like, they're just like, no concept there. I forget that we're in a very, very small minority who really understands and embraces it, knows the history, knows the politics, feels very comfortable with it. But what I find really, really heartening is the work that I do now in this space. A lot of it is around supporting people who are choosing to use these medicines in an intentional, safe, transformational way. And the people who are coming to me are doctors, nurses, chiropractors, massage therapists, nutritionists, who have their clients are coming to them and asking them, or like your experience, telling them, you know, I'm going to be doing this. And they, as the healthcare professionals, they have no idea how to respond to this. But now they're getting curious, and they're willing to open up the conversation. And basically, I think the ones that I work with are ones who just really care about their clients, and they want the best outcomes for their clients. And if there's this new, I say new, it's like the oldest thing around, newly adopted other method that breaks our old molds that are clearly not working, then they want to know, they want to learn. And the only way you can really learn is through experience, especially if you're going to be suggesting this to others. But some of the best referrals I get are when people come and talk to me and I ask them, well, how did you find out about me? When they say, oh, my doctor told me about you, or my psychiatrist told me about you, or like when those healthcare professionals are actually seeing that this could be something that could be supportive for their clients and sending them somewhere to someone who's willing to work in that space.
So I completely agree that there is no substitute for experience. What's your experience been like within your personal experience with psychedelics? Do you have is there a preference in terms of medicines and what?
Yeah, I can tell you a little story about the work that I'm doing now and how this came to be. Is before I was working in the space of psychedelics, in the corporate world of psychedelics, I had some interesting and transformational experiences with plant medicines myself. I'd also had high school dalliances and that kind of completely recreational. But I had experienced a few transformations in my life, and I was very, very excited about being in a position where, as part of my job, I got to learn more. I got to learn about the science behind what is this that's gone on for me. I got to learn about, as I was saying, the history. Where did this come from? How long has it been around? Why is it just coming to light now? And that leads into the politics and the squashing of these in our society. And I was having a hard time in my position. Things that used to bring me a lot of passion in this communications realm that I did, I was finding it was bringing some anxiety up for me. And through my own intentional work supported with plant medicines, I was able to identify that there was a real inauthenticity between what I needed to communicate, being head of investor relations, versus what I wanted to communicate from my heart about not just when the moon, when Lambo, when am I going to make my money, like all this sherbet stuff, but hey guys, like, look at this. This is an incredible opportunity for healing and for growth. And this is not, as an industry, it's not going to be a get quick, rich scheme. There's so many hurdles to get past, but I was able to identify that. And then I did have one particularly impactful experience with psilocybin, working with my 2 therapists. And I got a download that I couldn't not listen to, which basically the mushroom saying, okay, like we got you, but you're not doing the right work. You're not in the right place. Come down from that 40,000 foot level, come down from that left brain masculine world that you've been operating in for so long, and come down to your heart, embrace the coaching, the mentoring that you've done for over 20 years, and be where the transformation happens. And I literally walked out of that experience with 3 pillars that I wanted to dedicate myself to, which were, and I've never wavered. They are providing loving guidance, sharing evidence-based knowledge, and cultivating supportive communities. And the message was so clear that the next 6 weeks, which was all I could do of integration, was so difficult because I was prepared to walk into my boss the next day and say, sorry, but the mushrooms made me do it. I gotta move on. And in fact, that was the conversation I had with the CEO when I finally did resign. Was I've been called by the mushrooms, and this is the way that I need to work with them. And it was pretty hard, with that company being in the world of psychedelics, pretty hard for them to argue with that. So that's how I got doing what I'm doing now.
So I want to just stick a pin in the feminization aspect. I saw that you and Peg did a live the other night. I tried to get on it, and for some reason I couldn't find my way to it about this the resurgence or the renewal of the divine feminine. I want to definitely have that as part of our conversation today. I think that's a crucial part of the psychedelic renaissance, if you will.
Yes.
But I am so interested in your perspective on how this quote industry will evolve when our typical business models are so masculine, so domineering, so bottom line driven, but the work of psychedelics is so heart-centered, so grounded, so long view, right? Because like you said, the investment, and I think we've already seen this, like Film Trip and a lot of these companies that have come and gone very quickly, seeing that there's not a quick return in psychedelics. And so like, what's your perspective on the relationship of these kind of 2 aspects of the industry? Does that make sense?
I think so. I think what's coming up for me is I think that we are seeing a rising of the divine feminine in our societies in general. So it's hard to bring it just down to the industry of psychedelics if we're talking about industry. But I think what we're seeing is that we have gone so far into what's considered masculine traits, masculine tendencies of business, productivity, goal-oriented, financially oriented, and male-led. And we're seeing all around us a rising of more flow, of more women in leadership, of more all people just tuning into their hearts a little bit more, even when it comes to business. And I do think that COVID actually had a role to play in this coming into what's important to us. But I see the rising of the divine feminine in business showing us different business models, different ways to do business, more collaboration, less competition, more going on the journey, knowing that we will get to that end point rather than that's the end point, come hell or high water, we're going in this straight line. Now, psychedelics, as the world embraces plant medicine more, I do believe we're going to see that coming up even more. And this is not a usurping of men. It's in fact very different than men and women. These characteristics that are considered masculine and feminine. I do see that psychedelics are innately feminine in their nature. They start in that womb space, in that darkness, and they grow from there, bringing life up. And the way that they work in our bodies is opening up our perspective, allowing for more flow, and allowing for more heart-centered objectives, I would say. So, and even if you go back to, the original historic use of plant medicines, and you look at who was the tender of those plant medicines, who was the medicine keeper and the medicine giver, was women. And I see that rising throughout the psychedelic industry as well, and across our society as a whole, as the divine feminine comes up to be yin and yang at par with the masculine, rather than having that imbalance of yin and yang, masculine and feminine, in our business worlds and in our world as general, as to what we honor, what we respect, what we see as success.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, beautifully said. I'm so intrigued on how it will kind of unfold and look in terms of financial equalities or inequalities. It's an interesting time, and it seems like, as you see these different microcosms of psychedelic space, that it's almost as curious to me how the industry itself will shift very drastically, right? Like, so they're transformative, obviously. It's easy to see in an individual when they have their experience and then they're a new person. But then if you bring just the concept of psychedelics or the individual impact of the psychedelic experience into the individuals who are running businesses and see how that transforms, it's one of the things I've been really interested to see with Jamaica. It was almost a psychedelic virgin landscape. There were very few native Jamaicans were using psychedelics. And now that the industry is growing there, you're starting to see how it's impacting the general population. And so understanding these tools as transformative for the individual is pretty easy. But now, because we have been so far swung into the male dominant polarity, we're very quickly seeing the shift that they're bringing about on a larger perspective as well. Can you talk a little bit about, though, your personal journey within this this feminine space? Like, sounds like you were operating very much in this kind of masculine business model, but I'm really curious about like how this shift in energy is impacting you on a kind of a daily basis, and what your life looks like now as opposed to before this balancing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you so much for that question. Well, I think coming back to the career side, to kind of explain how I've morphed in that career side, I did end up resigning from my position, which was a big deal as far as my ego, everything. I had built this career for over 30 years. I didn't even realize how much of my identity of who I was wrapped up in this career, as far as financial stability, financial gains. But, I was at a point in my life where I could tick all the boxes of what societal success is, and yet I was feeling that discomfort, that dis-ease. And so right away, by taking that leap of faith, was unsettling and yet so settling at the same time. Just feeling like, okay, I am going to listen to my own divinity, to my own heart, and not within the structural confines of what I have known and believed to be true and believed to be success. My definition of success has completely changed and morphed. But what I ended up doing was, when I resigned, I dove headfirst into training and learning and apprenticing and supporting others, just like friends and family who were choosing to do this work, until I got to a point where I felt at least competent that I would be helping to reduce the risk, that I would be helping to provide safety, physical, psychological safety, that I had enough tools and experience that I could help bring that propensity for transformation into the experience and support people to even know that it's not the experience itself, it's what's wrapped around that's actually going to make the transformation. So I dove into serving medicine, supporting people with preparation and integration, and at the same time, I've always had a real passion for supporting women. That comes apparently from past lives, according to some people that I've talked to. But, also I spent 30 years in a very male-dominated industry where it almost felt like it was my responsibility to mentor and coach women who were coming into the industry. I'd had my own really interesting experiences of being coached and mentored in the male-dominated industry.
Yeah.
I'm seeing you have something to say.
Well, it's just like thinking about that, women coaching women how to function in a man's world, right? Like, whoa, never even really thought about it like that. Anyway,
well, it's interesting. When I started out my career, Eric, I've always had mentors and coaches, and I highly recommend them. My first mentor going into this career, she told me, okay, Dana, this was in the late 80s, so early 90s, I guess. She said, okay, you got to get the biggest shoulder pads you can get. You got to get some pantsuits. You got to brush up on your sports terminology. This is a man's world. You're playing in a man's world. You got to speak their language and walk their walk. And that's what I was being trained on from day one in my career. Interestingly, I also studied Eastern philosophies and religions in university, along with communications. And I ended up taking a master's in Asian business and working overseas in Southeast Asia for 4 years in management. And I in fact, wrote a thesis on comparing the differences about women in top management positions in Canada versus in Southeast Asia, which we consider to be such a male-dominated society, with the role of women as very subservient. Interestingly, there were more women in top management in Southeast Asia than there were in Canada at that time, in the early 90s, even back then. Now, a lot of the reason is because of family heritage. So a lot of family businesses ended up with women in top management positions. And not only there, but the thing is, the women in business there didn't feel like they have to be men to do business.
Yeah.
I never got that kind of advice and guidance over there. They're like, well, we're women, and this is how we talk, and this is how we collaborate, and these are the clothes that we wear. And so I think I was super fortunate that that was early in my career too, that I was able to have that as my environment for learning how to be a woman in business. And I think it really shaped me going forward of just feeling confident in myself rather than trying to be a guy in a guy's world. But I've totally deviated from even knowing what we were talking about.
That's so beautiful. I love that. And to know that about you really fills out kind of at least my immediate understanding of you as a space holder. I mean, that says a lot about you bringing that into your work environment when it was not the norm. And so we find ourselves in these as a space holder, navigating some challenging communications, and
Absolutely.
That sounds like it maybe was practice. I'm curious though, how do you now define success? You said that this has changed how
success is what's in your heart. It has nothing to do with what's external at all. Like success in our society is check boxes. I have the car. I have the 2.5 kids. I have the big house. I go on holidays. And what I have found from myself and from so many people that I work with is those boxes don't matter. They really don't. When what's really driving you is what you feel in your heart. How good do you feel inside? How much do you know? How much do you know yourself, value yourself, and love yourself? And then how can you give that out to the world? That is what success feels like. The boxes doesn't feel like success. Not to say you can't have all those things and still be happy, but so often that's what we're judging our happiness should be based on. And I've worked with hundreds of people, and in most cases it's not. So
do you see a relationship though between the internal success and the external quote success, right? And I've recently, in the last 2 or 3 years, been turned on to a lot of new thought leaders, and it has been a significant shift out of this masculine, I must, by the force of my will, achieve my goals, and have started to, first it came through psilocybin, but I wasn't really conscious of it until I started to listen to, Neville Goddard and Abraham Hicks and a lot of this kind of newer stuff that connected dots for me. And so do you have space to talk about that? I think it's such an important topic for us as we shift our perspective around success. There's nothing wrong with wanting, comforts for your family and a good education and healthy food and all of that. But when we get the cart in front of the horse, then we end up with this imbalanced society that we're trying to work ourselves out of. And so I'd love it if you could if you have any capacity to talk about that, if you've seen that relationship changing in your own experience, how it's impacting the success on the outside world, right? How has your change of perspective on success as an internal concept impacted your external expression of success in the outside?
Yeah, I think what a great question. I think that the thing that really comes up for me is this a difference between force and flow. And you kind of touched on it too, by force of will, I'm going to get this thing that equals success. Whereas if you are operating from your heart center and really understanding what things will make your heart sing, what things will make you happy, and you're working on those and understanding flow, understanding that flow is much more successful than force, and having faith that, you can still have goals, you can still have financial goals, you can still have tick box goals, but if you're coming from the place of contentment and joy in your heart, you're going to get to those goals in a way of flow, in a way of allowing those things to unfold for you. And so much sweeter is that success. It may be it may be slower, but in fact, it may not, because what you're doing is you're removing barriers that keep you from there as well. So, and I really, in the work that I do, I predominantly work with leaders, political leaders, entrepreneurs, CEOs, doctors now, which is great, but people who have a sphere of influence where I feel this is such powerful work. Because if they get it, the flow down effect or the flow across effect is it impacts so many people just by living by example, and people seeing, oh, okay, that they are actually content with their lives. They're actually happy and they're not destitute, like they're still doing well for themselves successfully as well.
Yeah, working with high performers has been, there's some unique challenge with that, right? Because most folks are coming out of that conquer framework. And then, at least in my experience, with some folks in that kind of demographic, that framework is often brought into the ceremony space, right? Initially. And then I've witnessed anyway, and have experienced myself, significant challenge in deconstructing that framework and adopting a new one. So like, let's starting to move into your work in space holding, kind of what do you see there? This is something that I don't feel like is talked about quite enough. Like very often we gloss over, like, someone takes psilocybin and they have this experience and they're transformed forever. But there is often such work required in reframing our view of the world that doesn't come easily. So I would assume that in some of these folks you're working with, they're coming in with that kind of dominator framework, and then you have the probably very wonderful opportunity of helping them recontextualize some of their experience and growth. So, like, if you want to get into kind of anonymous experiences, I personally think that there is incredible value in sharing journeys that we've witnessed people go through these transitions, to help give a more realistic expectation of that process. And if not, if you want to talk more globally about, witnessing those transitions, but just using that as a kind of an opportunity to move into the actual work that you're doing in the ceremony space.
Sure. Yes. Type A personalities and high performers generally have really like to be in control of the situation. They really like to know where they're going. They like to get there fast, and they like to know that they have control of that situation. So those are the three places that we need to start with. Going fast and having control. And these people with these personalities and who have these patterns in life, I find the real work is, first of all, educating them that it's not the experience. The experience is an experience, and the experience is just an experience if that's all you take into it, right? If you don't understand preparation and integration, occasionally there's profound, instantaneous transformations, but like Jack Kornfield says, like after the ecstasy, the laundry, you're still going back into your daily life. You're still going into that place where you've always been seen as this high performer who gets shit done, so how are we going to translate whatever comes from your experience into your everyday life? So what I find with people who fall into this category is we very often need more time for preparation, more time to let the nervous systems come into relaxation, to be open to letting go of control, to be open to talking the language of the mushrooms. Mostly it's mushrooms that I work with. So talking the language, which is listening to your body. Many of these high performers are so much in their heads. They have no connection to bodies and emotions. So really, really working on preparation with that. And then the integration afterwards. Okay, now you're going back into your everyday life. What kind of tools, practices, support are going to keep you motivated, are going to help keep that neuroplasticity alive in you, are going to continue to quiet down your default mode network and your ego so that you can work and operate in a different way. And there's a few things that I found really, really beneficial. One is community, connection.
Yes.
And this is one of the reasons that, really compelled me to join forces with gathering groups that has the model, that's a 12-week model, 8 weeks of preparation, in community before your experience, 4 weeks structured afterwards, and then a larger alumni community to go into so that you can continue to be inspired, to be witnessed, to be around like-minded people, and to share and support and hear other people's stories. That is so critical. Doing this kind of work in isolation is so challenging because it's very, very hard to break free of past patterns when you don't have that community and support around you. And I also, Peg probably talked about this, but I do find that with so many of people that are seeking out psychedelics, the bottom line of what the dis-ease is for them is actually disconnection.
Yep.
And isolation. So this is one way that I found to work particularly with these high performers, is to bring them into this gathering model that is so well supported from start to finish, and has a model that's proven to work and has the larger community for them to drop into and be supported with. The other thing that I found can be very supportive when we're talking about these larger dose journeys, as I was saying, like, okay, integration, as you know, those of us who work in this area, we know like integration is key. Integration is where you embody the insights, the downloads from the psychedelic trip. But there's more than, there are so many ways to integrate, and there's such big timelines for integration. But one of the things that I found is the most supportive ally for integration is actually introducing microdosing during that integration process. And that is more for the neurological support to, as I was saying, how do we keep that default mode network? That's where your sense of ego lies. How do we keep that chatter of that down to allow yourself to see yourself and to be yourself in a different light? How do we keep those new neural connections that happen during your journey? How do we keep those open? How do we keep that flexibility? So introducing microdosing as an ally for integration, particularly for people whose ingrained patterns and thought processes are that strong, that that microdosing can be a very valuable tool for that.
Yeah, for sure. So it sounds like community is already one answer to this question, but as a facilitator, I very often feel like I am benefiting every bit as much as the individuals that I'm in service to. And I'm curious for yourself, what are some big understandings that you're starting to come away with as you are a space holder, maybe the things that have changed your outlook on the human condition, what it is that we need, value in life, and obviously the heart-centered, refeminizing the community as well. But I would suspect, like myself, you are learning lots all the time. What can you share with us that you're learning from ceremony space?
We are all the same, and we are all simply having human experiences. And if we can look at our experiences as in that light, oh, I'm having a human experience, can really diffuse a lot of things that are going on in our lives and just bring us back into a common ground with everybody else. And that's one of the things that group community work actually shows and enlightens for people. But I mean, the number one thing, Eric, is what I already mentioned, is our society today is just so isolated and so disconnected, and we don't have the churches, the community centers, the extended families that we used to have, where we could go and really be seen as individuals and heard and witnessed and made to feel and know that we are important in this life. And I think underlying so many of the clinical conditions that are being treated with psychedelics, underlying just that sense of dis-ease, discomfort that we're feeling, something's just not quite right with my life. I think underlying so much of that is the disconnection, and just having that opportunity to be in community, to have places where, you can show up with your true heart, rather than, okay, we're going to go for a beer, we're going to go watch a show, we're going to go for a drink. That's not the real connection that we're all craving. And, community, connection, community does a lot of that, but the whole way that psychedelics work and the way that they connect different regions of our brain that weren't normally maybe connecting, they interconnect, they bring a sense of connection to self, to others, to the world. I mean, so many anecdotal reports of feeling this connection that draws us into something that's greater than ourselves. And I just see that is the one thing that people are really underlying, craving, missing. And when we can help them with that piece, that is the biggest support that we can give them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it sounds like you consider this a spiritual experience, but I wonder what kind of box do you put this in if you were to have to classify the psychedelic experience as mental health, spiritual health? Like how do you put it?
Oh, that's so interesting. I don't know if I have a box for that. I think that's too masculine of a I see this
That's an okay answer too.
Interwoven, because I'm seeing physical too, like lots of physical changes, emotional changes, mental health, the spiritual connection. I think it comes down to a lot of it comes down to working with intention and understanding what your intention is and understanding what's driving that intention. And then you'll find your work will align with your intention. So does that answer your question?
Absolutely. I mean, I completely agree. It feels like we are still trying to put psychedelics into this mainly box of mental health. And then we have the churches that are trying to create this spiritual health side. But what it seems like with gathering groups, that's one of the things that I've been most impressed with. Is it seems like a pretty healthy marriage of the physical or the mental and spiritual. The physical health is something that we really have yet to tap into, I think, collectively around the benefit of psychedelics. But I just couldn't agree more. It's a blending of all of these disciplines, all of these ways of experiencing and engaging with our world. Now, intentionality, that being the fuel. God, can you just talk more? I don't know, even though within the psychedelic world, there's a lot of talk about setting intentions. But I mentioned to one of our integration groups the other day, talking about, like living intentionally, being intentional throughout the day. And people were like, oh my God, I never even thought about that. And so, like, as we understand the power of intention to influence our psychedelic experience, extrapolating that out and how intention is really unconsciously in every aspect of our life. But when we bring that to a more conscious place, the impact is just incredible. You can see how your life changes. So can you talk a little bit more about this topic of intentionality?
Yeah, absolutely. So I believe that we are our own best healers and teachers. And we have this innate ability within ourselves to make change, to grow new neural connections. We can do the job of the psychedelics. And what I see intentionality and intention is empowering our own higher power, our own inner healer, and getting that ball rolling with our own power, to which we can bring plant medicines in, psychedelics in, to support us and enhance us. And so when we start working with intention, it is like what you were saying, like living a life intentionally. I have the people that I'm working with obsess over their intention. We work on it for a while, from starting with values, bringing it down, what's going on with their lives, bringing it down to a phrase, maybe a couple of phrases. From that, sometimes it's like this wish list, like this is my intention. I want this and this and this and this and this and this, rather than I want to show up in the world in this different way. I want to experience the world in this different way. And me, I think being a communications person and a wordsmith, I work with them on the words to bring down their intention into something that is really easily repeatable. You can write it down a couple times a day. You can put it on your dashboard on your car. You can put it on the mirror of where you're getting ready in the morning, and you can start to already rewire your brain, because we know this all the way back to the early leaders, back to Gandhi, Buddha, Oprah, like, you name it. A man, as Gandhi said, a man or a woman is but the product of her thoughts, right? So let's get those thoughts going first. Mm-hmm. And then we start almost like gathering evidence to start supporting the intention that you put in, so that we're getting that going and we are becoming conscious of living with intention and making this reality for ourselves before we even throw the plant medicine in. And I think around microdosing as well, the practice of microdosing is in itself a practice of living intentionally. Mm. And so microdosing is a great place to bring in that concept of just living with that intention. The plant medicines are just our ally. They're just our friend and our teacher that's going to help us to actualize those intentions.
What is it about microdosing that you feel like facilitates that more intentional living? Is it? Yeah.
Yeah. The reason I believe that is because of my philosophy and my theory around microdosing, which is starting at a differentiator between taking a microdose and microdosing for transformation. When you're microdosing for transformation, it's like, you can go to a yoga class and you can feel great after a yoga class. And you can be like, oh, okay, yoga is awesome. Everybody should do yoga. But if you were actually looking for long-term sustainable benefits, like you were looking to increase your muscle mass or enhance your flexibility or, increase your strength, one yoga class here and there might make you feel good, but it's not actually going to lead to long-term sustainable benefits. Mm-hmm. Microdosing for transformation is a practice. And it's a practice of living life intentionally. It's a practice of developing a relationship with the medicine. And so what it helps you to do is to create that intentionality on an everyday basis. The days that you're dosing, the days that you're not dosing. It's a very different perspective than nothing wrong with taking a microdose, but I work with people on microdosing for transformation.
Thank you for speaking of it in terms of a relationship with the medicine, because I feel like it's one of these remnants of the whatever overly masculine perspective is that, this is an external thing that I take that solves a problem for me, rather than some level of reciprocity, which there is. I think it's hard to maybe relate that to folks who don't have a relationship with sacred plants.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that? Like, how do you understand your relationship to the mushrooms in particular?
Right. Well, I think we are so ingrained in the pharmaceutical model of popping a pill, having it mask our symptoms, and getting on with our day. And that is a very, very hard model to break. It's so ingrained in our subconscious that even education around the psychedelic model being different, mm-hmm. It still is very, very hard for people to wrap their heads around. But when it comes to microdosing in particular, it's the pharmaceutical model will put a Band-Aid on your issues so that you can get on with your day, so that you can enjoy living life, so that you can live life. Whereas the relationship model is really built on, first of all, developing a relationship with yourself, empowering your own inner healer with intention, and then calling in the mushrooms to meet you at the strength that you're prepared to work yourself. And that's where the mushrooms are going to meet you.
Hold
So
on,
meet you at the strength that you're willing to put into this relationship.
Okay.
So if you're just going to sit back, we're talking particularly around microdosing right now, but if you're going to sit back and take a pill and expect it to do your work, well, what I found is that mushroom, it wants a relationship with you. It wants a reciprocal relationship with you. It wants you to express gratitude and to help it know how to help you. And it knows how from your intentions. And it's going to say, hey, how much are you going to give me in this relationship? What are you giving me to go on? So that it's even like coming back to almost like if you want to lose weight. So you figure just going on a diet is going to cut it. But what about if you went for a walk every day with a friend? What about if you went to bed earlier at night so you don't get those Netflix munchies? Like, what else can you bring into your life, into this relationship that's going to support the other things that you want working with you and helping with you? So, yeah.
I love that. Yeah, we've been talking a lot more lately about when folks are speaking of their intentions for a ceremony. I've been trying to help people frame it also in the context of not only what do I want to get out of this, but what am I bringing into this, right? Because what you bring into it is directly related to what you're going to receive from it as well.
Absolutely.
I mean, I stopped administering for a long time. I was doing encapsulating mushrooms.
Yeah.
And I just, in Jamaica, it made things a lot easier when you're, administering, 60 doses of psilocybin a month and you want standardization. But I saw very directly how it disrupted that relationship, and it reinforced that perception of I take a pill that fixes me. And so to have people, we teach people to grow mushrooms and to develop that relationship on multiple levels, and you see how much that impacts the outcome. I can't imagine going back to, and not to say that there's not the, value in like a lion's mane, psilocybin stack or any of that. But even with that, I had a mushroom farm for many years, grew medicinal mushrooms, and there is something very different to preparing a mushroom and consuming it rather than shaking it out of a bottle, popping it into your mouth. And so like that inner healer, awakening that inner healer, I feel like is such a big part of that relationship.
Absolutely. And I hear you on that it's hard enough to break our concept of that pharmaceutical model. But when you're trying to break that model with something that looks and feels and seems exactly like it, it's even that much harder. So yeah, I agree with everything that you're saying there. And I do feel that, best case scenario, you're growing those mushrooms yourself and you're infusing them with your energy from the very beginning. You are developing a relationship with the soil that they're grown in. You're talking to them every day and like being grateful for them to coming into your life. It makes so much difference. And even when you're working with a producer, you can tell the difference in the mushrooms that have been grown with intent and with love versus grown to make money. It's just, it's hard to, it's like, this is where we get into the woo side or the woo side. But the thing is, it's true.
No, 100%. And this is where, we give a lot of, lip service to indigenous cultures and, we've got to have reciprocity. And I'm always kind of like coming back to, well, if we're really going to pay honor to the traditions that brought these medicines forward, then we should be listening to their teachings about the medicine, about these sacraments, not just, sending some money down south or whatever. And what they taught is very clearly that those who pick the mushrooms influence the mushrooms. those who caretake for the mushrooms, influence, those who hold space for you have every bit as much influence over the space itself as the medicine, right? So divorcing it from this isolated perspective of, I've got a facilitator, I've got a mushroom, none of this is connected. It's all interwoven into some, beautiful tapestry that affects everything.
Yes. The whole mycelium network is what it is.
So, all right. Yeah. Since you've already bridged the woo gap here, and you've spoken about the mushroom kind of communicating to us, having a relationship. The mushroom wants something out of us. I want to dig into that a little bit deeper, because this is still a concept for me that I explore on a regular basis, how I understand the mushroom itself. And I'm curious, how do you relate to it and if this is too far in left field for you, that's totally fine, pass, but how do you relate to the mushroom, the organism, as a sentient or conscious entity? And I'm fully in team mushrooms are aware, fully. Yeah. So just so you know, but I'm also okay with, any perspective. Just curious where you stand on it.
I just feel that when you've been doing this work for a number of years and have maybe, supported hundreds of people with their experience, it's very hard to think any differently than the mushrooms are sentient beings and teachers, and that they innately know what it is that we need revealed to us and at what time. And they're very capable and willing to go in completely different direction than our intention. Wow. I absolutely am on the same team as you are there. I know one practice that I have with people who I am trip sitting for or guiding is that I still believe if you can grow your own, that's the best case scenario, but they will always receive their mushrooms at least by the day before they're going to journey, so that they have a chance to touch them, feel them, talk to them, sleep with them under the pillow, infuse them with their own energy, and start to build the relationship, that one-on-one or one person to a few mushrooms, build that relationship before they actually consume them. Consuming is only one step of the relationship building.
Absolutely. And then for listeners who may think, a dried mushroom, how can there be any life in the mushroom? Just from a cultivator's perspective, you can absolutely take a dried mushroom, excise tissue from that dried mushroom, and revitalize it and grow living mycelium from a dried mushroom. There's a capacity there, like a time frame, but I think we are maybe coming more into a not animism. Oh God, I'm blanking on the term. Damn, I'm blanking on the term. There's that there is consciousness, that there is in all things, there is a level of consciousness. And I think that psychedelics may help pantheism, help us to come to a more kind of grounded, because it doesn't have to be woo-woo. We think about it, we talk about this, which is a remnant of this male-dominated culture, evidence-based culture. But there is evidence that we can see that our thoughts, our hearts, our feelings impact the space around us, that there is sentience in what seem like inanimate objects, that there is a resonant vibration that is aware of its surroundings, that is impacting its surroundings. So we have so much to learn,
Absolutely. And I do feel like we have been confined by science. Science is important and relevant, very, very necessary, but there are just so many things that science can't measure, or hasn't been able to measure so far. I'm aware of one project that will be coming out soon called the Love Project, that is kind of looking at how to measure the expansion of love in people who have experienced psychedelics. So this is kind of the more magical side.
were you at the conference in Denver, MAPS conference?
No, I didn't go. No.
I think that I didn't attend it, but I think I saw a workshop that was given on this, and I found it really, really interesting. Because for me, that's certainly, MDMA more so. I think maybe goes without saying, but psilocybin as well has definitely served to open my heart up. But it's been the person that I am now after only in the last couple of years, I've been intentionally working with MDMA. I can feel my awareness in my heart like I have never been able to before. I can feel that I can perceive and think about things with my heart. And as you're talking about how valuable science is, and absolutely it is, but even within the psychedelic sciences, we're only looking at the brain when there are, neuroreceptors all over our body. You talk about the Eastern traditions and like the Taoist three Dantian and whatnot. And so I'm excited to see us expand the conversation outside of the mental health and move into other.
Well, and I see a move in that direction that I'm so excited about. Like, first of all, talking about these things that are so hard to measure. We now have the Watts connectedness scale from Dr. Rosalind Watts, a way of trying to quantify the level of connectedness that people are feeling, and using that in kind of before and after with psychedelic experiences. I know that the Love Project is coming out with another scale as well, that we'll be able to start to measure these things. And there's the spiritual, that one's slipping my mind right now, but there's one to kind of measure your spiritual awakening, I suppose. And then, the clinical diagnosis and coming out of just being mental health related. I also think that's a necessary way that we've had to come into bringing psychedelics into the mainstream, having it accepted by medical professionals, etc. But it's so much bigger than that. And I'm super excited that with Gathering Groups, we are part of a new clinical trial here that's happening in Canada, where I think N1000 for this clinical trial that is focused entirely on wellness. There's no DSM-5 measurements. There's no mental health diagnoses needed or even measured or accounted for. We're looking purely at wellness and our wellness scores. And that, I think, will be the first ever clinical trial that is not focused on a clinical diagnosis.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So we're moving in the right direction there.
Yeah. And much faster than I would have imagined, honestly. I think was a testimony to the transformative nature of psychedelics. Do you ever imagine what our culture, Western culture, is going to look like? Give it 10 years if we are in fact allowed to continue working with these medicines in a safe, public, communal fashion. Like, how do you envision this in the next decade? I know it's a big imagination, or it's a big question that's purely imagination, but I am curious what your perspective is.
Yeah. Well, I see the trend will be going as far as public acceptance and public more mainstream consuming of plant medicines and psychedelics. The legalization, the clinical diagnosis route, I think will come first in most cases. But I think it's going to continue to be a parallel route where decrim comes along with it, and maybe some kind of paradigms around the decrim, so that people are empowered to be able to explore these amazing spirits for just expansion of consciousness, for growth, for self-development, for relationships, for communication. And what I see coming along with that is the reconnecting of community, the reconnecting of ourselves with the earth, just getting back to where we were in the beginning, where we were at one with Mother Nature. We lived in relationship with Mother Nature. We live in relationship with each other. Coming back to the connection, and that is hand in hand with that intertwining and the rising of the divine feminine, where relationships become more important to us again.
So how does this intersect with technology? I would think you've got a pretty interesting vantage point there as well. If as you suggest, and I think seems only natural, that we would move back more towards connectivity with the earth, and at the same time we have this other current that is running parallel that is, I hesitate to say disconnected, but when I see videos of the new whatever it's called, there's some new Apple VR augmented reality where people are like walking down the street with their headset on and they're like moving stuff with their hands, as they're walking down the street. Like, how do we reconcile these two worlds? Do you have a vision for that?
That's a good direction to go there. The first thing that came up for me is, well, what about all our connection apps that we have right now? Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, all the rest of them. Like, have they really made us more connected as far as heart connected?
Mm-hmm.
We know what people are doing, what's going on, or what it looks like is going on in their world. But, are we connected? And I think the answer is no. I think that's brought actually much more isolation and much more disconnection, without disregarding that those technologies have also brought a lot of good.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like a black and white thing. And I think they need to coexist. I mean, I think it comes back to even, the development of the internet, and people were so scared at the beginning, but that can get into the hands of the wrong people, but that's going to introduce all these opportunities for crime, like all of the bad things. And you kind of have to sit back and say, yeah, it can facilitate those things. And it can also facilitate so much good in the world as well. And I mean, who knows with, the VR and the way that it's going, what if one day it could almost replicate these mind expanding experiences that we're having? Who knows what direction it could go in there. So there is always the nefarious route.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's opening ourselves up to the possibility of how could that be used for good? How could
Absolutely.
that be used in conjunction with the expansion of our consciousness?
Absolutely. Even psychedelics, I mean, they're not only used for altruistic purposes, right? If
Yes.
you look at traditional societies and the brujos or the dark shaman, and so I very much appreciate the perspective. There's a teacher that I listen to who regularly kind of reminds us that everything is neutral. We get to apply the value to it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Nothing has meaning except the meaning that we put on it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Which you see, can be a daunting consideration to realize that everything is meaningless until you understand that it's a great liberation.
Absolutely.
So talk to me a little bit about the post community. I'm curious, after speaking with Peg and here, you're talking about the work that you are doing within the 12 weeks. Sounds really powerful. And I just love this big container for the experience.
Mm-hmm.
But what does the community look like after those 12 weeks and people continue to engage? Kind of what are you seeing develop out of that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so community, as you heard at the beginning, cultivate supportive communities. That's one of my pillars. I think it's so critical, particularly in this space, particularly because disconnection is at the root of of so much that I see going on in our world, particularly because at this point in time, we're still talking like gray market. You can't talk to necessarily your family, your friends, what's going on. We need community of like-minded people for our continued growth and safe spaces, actually. So it's always been something that I've done ever since I launched the Flourish Academy, which is my brand. And we have a community of about 3,200 that meets 3 times a week on the Clubhouse app. I raised Sisters in Psychedelics as a community for women, particularly the elevation of women in this space. And it was one of the key things that really intrigued me and enticed me to work so closely with gathering groups, is that they have that same understanding and passion around community. And the community that we grow, the connection that we grow in these small, no more than 8 people in a group in that 12 weeks is absolutely phenomenal. And the results that come from that, like from being in community, by the time we get to the plant medicine, our nervous systems are all, ready to open and to receive. And then what happens after the 12 weeks is, it's many of our groups continue to meet on a regular basis without the facilitators there. We empower them. We provide them with outlines on how to do it. We provide them with prompting questions. We provide them with the model. If you would like to continue to meet, because sometimes they want that same community that they've developed and grown with and become so intimate with. We give them the tools to be able to do that. But we also have a larger alumni community that we can tap into together. We exist on Mighty Networks, like many communities these days. We have a weekly drop-in gathering session every week. If you've been through the program, you can come in on a Tuesday night and be with this community of like-minded people and go through the same exercises, the same format that you're familiar with gathering groups. We now offer alumni programs as well for the large dose journeys that are almost like the 12-week ones, slightly condensed because we've already learned the language of the 12-week ones, and we're able to drop in that much quicker. We also provide a program called Microdosing for Psychedelic Integration. So once you've gone through with the community, done your large dose journey, you can continue to be in community while you embrace microdosing and continue to integrate together as a community with that. We have often one-off events. We'll have cannabis sound ceremonies, etc., where people just know that where they're getting together with like-minded people who are open to these experiences and who they can show up to as themselves, as their authentic selves, be witnessed, be heard, and be valued. So that alumni, that greater alumni community and all the opportunities that come with that are every much as bit of value as the 12-week program themselves.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Because, what you were saying at the start of living in this bubble, this psychedelic bubble, is so true. And to be able to have just somewhere that you can go and share your ongoing experience. It does not end with the ceremony. It does not end with the 4 weeks of integration afterwards. And what has been always so beautiful to me, even with the retreats in Jamaica, but we're seeing it much more now here with Sanctuary, is that after people have these experiences together, that they, of their own accord, very often will continue to facilitate that connection. And that is one of the markers of success for me. Like that, I see that and I'm like, all right, I know that we're doing a good job in pointing people in the right direction. Because, administratively or organizationally, it gets really, as an organization grows, it gets harder and harder to facilitate those smaller communities. And so really helping people understand that we can do what we can do, just like you all are doing, providing these opportunities to meet afterwards. But just like all the other aspects of integration and personal growth, it takes our own commitment to that growth to continue to engage in the process and not leave it behind. So it really sounds like you all are doing beautiful work. And I'm so excited to see more models like this that are just not confined to a clinical, strictly therapeutic, and even strictly spiritual. I mean, I do, for me, psilocybin is a spiritual at its core It is an energetic spiritual experience. But I know that there's a lot of resistance to quote religion because of what religion has done. So I really value what you all are bringing into the psychedelic space.
Yeah, thank you. It's such an honor to be able to be doing this work and supporting people with their growth, whether that's spiritual growth in self-love. I do believe as well that it's all spiritual. All the changes and transformations we make, whether that's however you define spirit, energy, God, whatever it is. There is definitely a spiritual element to this.
Indeed. Well, thank you, Dana, so much for your time. I want to ask you the one last question that we always ask our guests is, what does psilocybin say to you?
Psilocybin says, we've got you in the right place. Keep doing what you're doing. Spread our good news and let more people understand our magic, our beauty, our power.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Dana.
Thank you, Eric. It's been a pleasure.